what we're going to do here today is actually, there's lots of things in the media about microtargeting and segmentation, and we're going to talk about a critical underlying technology that powers microtargeting, and how it works and what kind of concepts it's taken from the last few years in private industry, and why it's really important to microtargeting and many other things down the road. And it all starts with the voter file, which some of you are probably familiar with. Others, don't quite know what it is. That's all right. It was pretty esoteric, and I didn't know what it was until I started this job either. Which has basic information about people, and sometimes has additional insights with respect to their voting behavior, what party they're registered with, whether they show up to vote or not. In some states, their race is part of what's collected because of the Voting Rights Act. And what a lot of people talk about when they talk about microtargeting is the enhanced voter file and how that's used as a starting point to segment. The enhanced voter file will have things such as the regular voter file, which comes from a Secretary of State, and it's fairly, unformatted, not well organized, not very clean, and then companies like Catalyst take that information and clean it up. And there have been many companies over the years that provide that service to progressive organizations and campaigns. On top of that, there's enhancing the file, which can include commercial data that has lifestyle or behavior information. For those who can't see the PowerPoint, there's internet usage, marital status, estimated income, census information about where you live, how blue collar your neighborhood is. These can be very important in predicting the behavior. And then historical response data, known as IDs in political parlance, about which candidate you're supporting, what issues are important to you, whether you're a volunteer or not. And from all of that, and then lastly, license information. And this is actually where you hear a lot of the Republican PR around microtargeting has a lot to do with ski-mobiles and finding out if people do yoga and the Volvos. And some of that data is out there. It's not, the coverage of it's very poor, and so the conclusions you can draw from that information can be limited. But things like licenses and whether you're a veteran or not can be really important in predicting it. And all that is fed into the algorithms that are used for microtargeting. And in 2004, these voter files were used for field canvassing, phone calls, et cetera, as well as these type of models. Which candidate do you support, Kerry or Bush? Turnout, are you likely to turn out or not? Fundraising, and then is the Iraq War really important to you? Is choice really important to you? And those things were used to craft message, to deploy resources, to run your campaigns. And enter Catalyst, which took the lessons from 2004, where every state's file was in a different format. There wasn't a commercially enhanced information available everywhere, or if it was there, it was prohibitively expensive for people to acquire. And what Catalyst has done has built a 50-state national database that's available to all progressive organizations, both campaigns, C3s, C4s, 527s, has also, as a shared resource, taken the expense of acquiring unregistered people for voter reg groups, enhanced it with this commercial data that's out there, added specialty data using resources that a common organization wouldn't have to bring to bear, integrated it with popular field applications like the VAN so you can use that data in the field context of canvassing, and built its own application for subscribers to have right off the bat so that when you decide you're using the file, you're not just given a file, you're given an application that allows you to actually mine and pull lists. And all those things are important and at the foundation of Catalyst. But in the grand scheme of things, it's actually just the block and tackling part of Catalyst's mission, which is to be a permanent piece of progressive infrastructure that's evolving as fast as the world around us is evolving in technology. And so one of the things I did when I came in to run the technology part of Catalyst was actually look at what's going on in the industry as well. And for those who don't know, prior to Catalyst, I was at Amazon.com for 7 years, had a variety of positions there. And so Web 2.0 was really catching hold in 2005 and coalescing a lot of the concepts around why companies were successful on the internet and why other companies were not. And what we're going to do today is talk about those concepts and how they've filtered into how Catalyst has built its technology, why it's taken the voter file and enable things like microtargeting, but enables a lot more than that, and also why all of this is great for progressive politics and giving us a great advantage. So there's lots of different terms around Web 2.0. You'll hear it used in a lot of contexts. There's no official definition. It's people will, if they see something that they really love, they'll say, oh, that's Web 2.0. In fact, we get reporter calls where they'll be like, we're doing a story and we're going to contrast someone doing online fundraising, just Web 2.0, with you guys building a big database. Because that really sounds mainframe 90s. And one of my goals at the end of this talk is to disavow anyone of that opinion, because they're actually, in a lot of ways, there's situations where it's very easy to see what the right thing to do is in embracing the web and the internet. And actually, when it comes to back-end systems, that's actually sometimes the hardest place to understand where these new techniques and technology can be employed. And as a result, it's one of the areas where I think on the progressive side, actually, we've been the most behind. And so from O'Reilly's document, he talks about 7 concepts. And we're going to go through each of them and talk about examples and then how these things actually come into politics. And the first is kind of an obvious one, which is the web is a platform. And there's lots of companies that you can pull out. Obviously, Amazon.com, with no physical retail presence, all orders online, embraced that from the very beginning. Facebook has made the online community, again, nothing physical about Facebook and Google. And those are like the 3 companies that really come to mind very quickly. Well, what does it mean for someone like Catalyst? The first thing was, with the data that's being compiled, is if it's inaccessible, it doesn't matter what you've done. And one of the big lessons from 2004 is there actually was a lot of great data built, but in a lot of cases, it wasn't made available to the people that need it. You need to be able to self-service yourself. You need to be able to have access to it. Going to a database administrator, a person, to get help in October, right before a presidential election, doesn't scale, because chances are the person you're relying on, they didn't hire enough people to actually handle the volume during those critical periods. And so from the very beginning, this back-end large data set needed a web-based interface that was available to all our clients that came as part of it. We don't even give clients the opportunity to cheap out and say, we just want the data, we don't want the web interface, because we know that's a disaster down the road. And so the application goes with it. We also did one thing a step further, which is web services and the ability for programmers at other organizations to hook into what you build is really important. And for progressive organizations, this is a really unfamiliar concept, because they might not have technical staff, or if they do, they're not used to these types of technologies. But we've been trying to push the envelope there, and we'll talk about a couple of cases later in the presentation about how web services are being used. But all of these things are demonstrative of the web being a central platform for delivering the data that you build and how that's critical to succeed. This is probably the most important slide I actually have. So it's about probably the biggest difference between what you read about with respect to microtargeting and what's actually important in what you do. And that's that harnessing collective intelligence. And what does that mean? Well, let's start with Wikipedia, which is probably the most classic example out there right now, where you have the masses actually editing documents. They've done studies comparing it to Encyclopedia Britannica, and actually it's just as accurate as the encyclopedia, and yet it's maintaining a completely different model than what we're used to. At Amazon, going one step further, sometimes people think with collective intelligence that means, oh, it means that you should have only users populating things. Well, that's not completely true. It means you pull everything you have accessible to you to one place to take full advantage of it. At Amazon, a little known behavior of the site is that when you put in a product search, you don't just get the products that best match your search term, which people might find really counterintuitive, but you actually get, first of all, you get the things that other people have clicked through on, which makes sense. That's similar to how Google's PageRank works. But there's actually another element that is people find really surprising, which is that there's actually a real-time inventory check on what's in stock. And so if some item actually matches your search term, but it's not actually available, you don't see it at the top of the search results. Because why would you want to? You're not going to be able to buy it. And so harnessing collective intelligence is really important. It can come from a lot of different avenues. We talked about Google's PageRank. Flickr's another great example where tags are being used to develop something that's an alternative to a taxonomy that's actually user-generated and evolving over time. So all these things are important. How does it apply to politics? For Catalyst, it's not only the objective to store and organize data that we acquire, voter files, commercial data, it's also in perpetuity to collect person data from all of our clients. Catalyst today has 65 organizations using Catalyst services, including matching membership, matching donors, IDs being collected in the field. All of these things can be uploaded easily to Catalyst. And one of the missions right at the beginning was that we needed to do it in a way where the technical limitations around cooperating from organization to organization was friction-free on the technical side. And so it just became a political issue whether the Sierra Club and League of Conservation Voters wanted to work together on a race, share their IDs, share any other information that is uploaded to Catalyst. What we've done also with Catalyst is build metadata, and this is where the micro-targeting comes in, which is that by taking in all of this collected information from organizations, adding it to what Catalyst has already taken, Catalyst has the opportunity to build things and has this cycle like a national partisanship model, which is built off of a sample that's much larger than any normal micro-targeter would be able to do. We were able to use our national database and do a sample in the millions, bring in the actual response data that's much richer than any one organization could collect themselves, and have that go into what's built. And the last thing, which I think is really cool, is building the interfaces that allow the organizations, as they do their canvas and find out that that person actually doesn't live there anymore, as they do their phones and find out that that phone number is bad, all that information can be inputted back to Catalyst, and we have the opportunity to update that so that not just that one client gets better phone numbers the next time, but all the clients do. And so that's part of the cooperative nature of what's been built. And actually going back, so the last thing, so the thing to take away from that is that micro-targeting is one really important outlet of this, but what Catalyst has built is an ecosystem for these organizations to interact with, plug into. And so data is the next intel. Well, this is probably obvious given companies like Amazon and Google, where they've used, whether it's their product catalog, customer database, to drive recommendations, or in Google's case, spidering the entire internet and using the user behavior to build the best mousetrap. In their case, their search engine was just better than everyone else's because it used the user information. For Catalyst, it's been giving instant access, easy upload, and then getting organizations to be part of the collective. And but the last point that actually is the most powerful and actually speaks to, for the folks that were in the morning when someone asked the question around, well, you got the fundraising, you got all these different silos, and how do you marry that stuff up? One of the things we did at the very beginning was realize that a technical contribution to the progressive community would be the ability to match people to our database. That once we have this national database, it's not just that we're giving that data out. We had to be able to take lists from people, whether it's their social network, their activists, their donors, and be able to match it to the system, add it if they don't exist, and be able to give back the unique identifier for those people that we have so that they can start to utilize that, because that'll be a valuable resource. And so that proprietary matching system was built internally to allow organizations to do that. And the result, and we're just now starting to realize, and organizations are starting to realize the power of this, is that you can take all these different silos inside an organization, the Canvas programs in field, the donor list from fundraising, membership lists, polling information, people being engaged online, maybe through social networks, and tie those all together with the Catalyst backbone and have a 360-degree view of those people so that you know who are the people that I canvassed that are also engaged online and were polled and maybe gave us money. And maybe if they haven't given us money, maybe we should ask, because that would be a good thing to do. And so this is really the cusp of where we are. Groups are just now realizing that they have the opportunity now with what we've built to be able to tie that all together. The end of the software release cycle is something that for folks non-technical probably happened and they didn't even notice. But in the 90s, when you bought products for your computer, if there was something wrong with it, you're kind of just screwed. There was just, you had to wait for the next update. It was going to be shrink wrapped. Maybe you could complain and they'll mail you something. You're just not going to get something from them. As companies like eBay and Netflix build their entire business around online-based activity, they've become pros at making fixes instantaneously on the website, rolling out new features really quickly, and not getting out of this shrink wrap mentality. And the same can be true for politics. In the 90s, and I know some people in the room know better than others, the voter files were just handed off to organizations, and that was it. You know, you got the voter file. If there are problems with it, there's problems with it. You know, in today's world, that's just unacceptable. People expect things to be not only updated in real time, but available all the time, and things should never go stale. And that's a good expectation to have, because that's how people have for the rest of the world. And so what you've seen with Catalyst is the ability to put new features and bug fixes quickly. And you're actually seeing that throughout the progressive world, where as things go online, the expectations for those organizations to fix problems immediately in real time is really good. And means that they have to be staffed to handle that. And in 2004, there were a lot of scaling issues around capacity and scaling. And you know, our goal in 2008 is to not let that happen with what we've done. And I know that critical players like the VAN and the DNC have the same pressure on them and are preparing for the inevitable, that there's going to be 10 to 20 to 100 times the amount of usage in those final 2 months than they planned for. And it was funny, when I came from Amazon, the parallels between Christmas at Amazon to the elections and politics are actually really similar. In Amazon, we basically went into a crouching position in October and just braced for impact, because in November and December, the usage of the systems was just so ridiculous that you were just fixing problems and trying to fix them as fast as possible before people saw it. And the election world is very similar, and this Web 2.0 concept of getting out of the notion of software releases and being agile and getting fixes out is really critical. So lightweight programming models. You know, the Amazon Web Services was one of the pioneers in being able to provide an access into the product catalog and reviews. There's other great ones. I think YouTube is actually the one I have the most fun with, because YouTube was brilliant in a lot of ways, but in one of the ways in particular was that they made the recognition early that most people aren't just going to randomly come to YouTube and watch a video. And so it was critical to be able to embed those videos on other websites. And you know, the vast majority of viral views starts with these embeds that occur all over the internet. And so that's really critical. And Facebook actually inverted that with the notion of building applications inside the Facebook environment. But in all those cases, it starts with an attitude that you're not going to do everything in the universe. And so if you start there and realize you need to be good at what you do and not do everything, you're going to be better off. And with Catalyst, where that actually led us was the fact that the VAN is actually a great application. And so for those of you who have used it in field, we didn't have an intention to just duplicate things that were working. Instead, we wanted to add where there were gaps on the progressive side. And so we built this database, we built the hooks into it, we built web services for others to hook into, which the VAN uses, and MoveOn uses for things like the Vote Poke application to check voter registration if you've been there. That's actually using Catalyst behind the scenes. We built formats that modelers can use for microtargeting, SAS and SPSS straight off the bat. And we built a model at the business level for syndication so that groups can distribute the data to other groups and that they could be a retail outlet to our wholesale presence. And all those things are great. And it's that lightweight programming model that we've seen from other companies out there used successfully at play in a political context. So software above the level of single device, you know, TiVo and iPods come to mind immediately. And this is an area where I think on the progressive side we haven't made as much progress as we should. We've built a lot of different configurations to the data for pollsters, for franked mail, for fundraising, for strategists. But aside from the VAN POM syncs that occur, there's very few examples of progressive data coming out into the forms of other devices. And one of the things that I think everyone should be spending more time on is how to make things more BlackBerry friendly, because they are so pervasive amongst the political staffs in these groups, and yet so few applications actually work on them, and so few things are formatted for them. So, important concept, one that we're just scratching the surface in. And rich user experiences, I think we've seen with Gmail, where they've really changed the way that you can interact with a web-based application. You know, really makes people think that the web can be used in ways that hasn't been used before. Because before, you couldn't imagine doing word processing over the web, but now you can imagine that. For Catalyst, this meant actually spending money on professional user design, drag and drop features, maps. Incidentally, these things actually sometimes fly in conflict with making things more mobile and accessible by other devices. So it's actually in conflict, and our app has actually gotten less mobile deployable over time because of this actual conflict. So where's this all going? If with these concepts at play, we believe that we're acquiring more data, fostering more collaboration, and that there's going to be more innovative applications built for progressives. A lot of them are going to be done outside of Catalyst by others, and that's great. That's what you want. And as you see down the line, there's a lot of concepts out there that might play in, such as the semantic web, crowdsourcing. So just to give you a quick rundown description of what the semantic web is, the idea of actually having the computer have more decision-making ability over the context of what you do. So rather than going to Amazon to buy a book, you tell your computer to buy a book, and it knows to go to Amazon and buy the book, because that really changes the power of what can be done. And if these things can be pushed out to the masses, then you can really change the way activism is done. Having the crowds weigh in on where things go, using different data sources in conjunction with each other, and then being able to better identify people. And the open ID movement is really fascinating. So I believe all these things, if harnessed correctly, will lead to more progressive power. So anyways, thanks.